Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm going to be talking about the full moon in Virgo, looking at it from the perspective of all 12 signs, and I'm also going to be putting it in the context of whatever else is going on around the time. So this full moon in Virgo is the last full moon in winter. But of course, if you're in the southern hemisphere, it's the last full moon of summer. But as I often say, astrology has a northern hemisphere bias due to the idea of the seasons, the spring when Aries comes in, full summer, with Cancer, and so on and so on. So I apologize to you in the southern hemisphere, but let's stick with our classical astrology terms. So this full moon is also known as the worm moon, and apparently this has a lot to do with the fact that it's at this time of year in the northern hemisphere that the beetle larvae emerge from the bark of trees as the tree bark is thawing, and that's the origins of why it got called the worm moon. The other thing we need to know is the time that it happens, and you can work this out really from, however far you are from the Greenwich meridian. So we're talking about 11:42 on the 7th of March, UTC that is, and obviously if you're in Australia, it's going to be a good 11 hours forward from that, and if you're over on the west coast of the Pacific America, then you're going to be at least 8 hours before that. So let me talk a little bit about this full moon in what it means. I always remind us that a full moon is about closure and completion, because when we look at the moon at its fullness, it is complete. And from that point, it starts its waning cycle. So in a way, when we look at the full moon, and then I take you through the meanings for each of the 12 signs, the things I'm going to be talking about actually have a kind of 2-week lifespan. So that's something very much to think about in terms of what to expect. It's a bit of a cycle. But certainly I would recommend looking at the full moon. And this full moon could be particularly special because we have Venus and Jupiter in the evening sky, and they're going to look very, very bright because they're going to be very close together. And we're also going to see a Mercury-Saturn conjunction as well. So the night sky, even to our naked eye, is going to look very pretty from time to time. And another thing, that if the full moon falls close to the horizon, which means it's sunset or sunrise to you, it will seem very large, but that's only because it's near to us and not because, it's near to the horizon, not because it's a super moon. It isn't a super moon, but I will let you know whenever we have a super moon. Now, other things I want to talk about really in the idea of this Virgo full moon. The sun is in Pisces, the moon is in Virgo, so we have the Virgo Pisces axis really brought to the forefront, and that has a lot to do with the balance between responsibilities and duties, the things that we must do, versus that sense of escapism where we escape the restrictions that are placed upon us. And we need to find a balance between that, because we can't be all work and no play, or in this case, all work and no escape. On the other hand, we can't be escaping and evading all our duties and responsibilities, because then we become sort of unhinged, unanchored. So this full moon, just in its very principle of Virgo Pisces, is talking to us about that. Now, the other thing about this full moon, which makes it rather more important, is that it accompanies the arrival of Saturn into Pisces. Now, I've done a video before this on Saturn in Pisces, what it means and how or where it is for the 12 signs of the zodiac. But suffice to say, when you see this full moon, remember that it is announcing if you like. It is the herald of Saturn in Pisces, which is a pretty important astrological development, which is why I took a whole video to tell you all about it. So let's have a look at how this full moon looks in the context of whatever else is going on at the time. Now, the full moon is there, cutting across the MC-IC axis, the midheaven and the IC. And I've taken this full moon from the perspective of Lisbon in Portugal. You know, I like to dot around the world and look at various capital cities, and so that we can see that everything affects the whole world. It isn't just our spot of the world that we're looking at things from. But I think you can see clearly here the sun at the very top of the chart, sort of in that 1 o'clock position, and the moon at the very bottom in that 7 o'clock position. And you will also notice that the planets are sort of grouped together. It's a sort of cross between a bundle and a bowl shaping, but it's more a bundle than a bowl. And so at the moment of this full moon, we've got a bundle with the moon as the handle to this bucket, which means that the moon is the medium through which all of this is expressed. So it's very emotional. It's very much addressed to things of a personal, people-oriented nature. And the other thing to note when we look at this horoscope is that if you look in the 5 o'clock position, you'll see something that looks like a kind of reversed omega. Now that is the south node, and it's not a planet. It's the end of one end of the nodal axis, which means it's the point at which the moon connects with the ecliptic. The moon's path connects with the ecliptic. So it's a very special axis, and I talk about it from time to time. It's where eclipses take place, so they have a rather game-changing, fateful effect, if you like. Now, the other thing that isn't part of this picture is the symbol at the 3 o'clock position. That's the circle with a cross in it. And that's what we call the part of fortune. It's one of the Arabian parts, and it has a lot to do where we find our joy. But that's another story for another time. So what I want to show you on this is where the sun is. We can see that the sun is about 8 degrees from the planet Neptune, and Mars, if we look at Mars in the kind of 9 o'clock position, is about 4 degrees away from a square or a 90 degrees aspect from Neptune. Now, if we look towards Mercury, which is just to the right-hand side of the midheaven, to the right of the sun, that is the symbol for Mercury, it seems quite a long way away from Neptune. But in fact, by the week of the 13th of March, they will all be very closely aligned. We'll have a Mercury-Neptune conjunction, a Sun-Neptune conjunction, and a Mars-Neptune square. And I'm going to be talking about that shortly, but also I'm going to leave a discussion about this kind of thing towards the end of my video here. It's my conclusion this time. Now, if you look to the right of Mercury, you'll see the symbol for Saturn, and you'll see that it is 29 degrees, 59 minutes, and 8 seconds away from entering Pisces. And in fact, it does so about 55 minutes later. Saturn will have entered Pisces. A few days earlier, around about the 3rd of February, Mercury and Saturn were conjoined. And at the same time, Venus and Jupiter were conjoined. This is the 3rd of March, around that time. So when we looked at those two kind of combinations, and remember I talked about having a look at the night sky and seeing Venus and Jupiter together, which is a beautiful sight. So it's a beautiful evening sky turning into night. And we'll also see that Mercury-Saturn conjunction round about the 2nd of February, something like that. These two conjunctions couldn't be more different. When we look at Venus and Jupiter, the greater benefic, which is Jupiter, the lesser benefic, which is Venus, it's all joy and love. and all sorts of things that make us feel abundant, that things are abundant, that things are growing in a good way. When we look at Mercury and Saturn, we think the opposite. We think things are shrinking. We're looking at everything. That glass is half empty, not half full. But when I think about these two conjunctions happening at the same time, they can work well with each other in that you can put something of a joyful, romantic, loving, even a monetary kind of combination onto a firm footing, a legal footing, a formal footing with that Mercury-Saturn conjunction. And so we're sort of looking at the idea of formalize, making strong, making durable those things of a Venus-Jupiter nature, the things we love and enjoy. And we could also be looking at a period of time where there are some things going on that are great and good and jubilant and make us feel happy, and some things that make us feel very, very sad indeed. And we need to bear that in mind. I also said I wanted to talk a little bit about the Neptune aspects that come together. We don't understand a lot about Neptune. We don't feel Neptune, so to speak, when it's out there on a limb all on its own. But when the personal planets, the moon, the sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, they connect to Neptune, then it draws it into our personal experience. So when we have like three planets, and in this instance, we're going to call the sun a planet. We know it's the sun, we know it's the center of our solar system, but we call it a planet in inverted commas. So we've got the sun conjunct Neptune, we've got Mercury conjunct Neptune, and we've got Mars squaring Neptune all around the 14th, 15th, and 16th of February. So this is a generally very confusing period. When we look at Neptune in its good phase or its positive light, then we're looking at things to do with inspiration, miraculous, divine. We're looking at things that are sort of, out of this world with Neptune, and we need that. Just as I said with the full moon in Pisces, Virgo, we need our escapism, but we can't live in our escapism all the time. We need to come back to reality, and we need responsibilities and order and duty. So this is the same with Neptune. We need our sprinkling of, fantasticness, our fantasy, our divinity, but not too much of it, because Neptune's other face is about deception, conspiracy, duplicitousness, loss, erosion. If we have kind of inspiration and great thinking under Neptune, we get madness and absolute craziness on the other end of that. So these are things to bear in mind when we're looking at a time when Neptune is particularly strong. Now, I would say any time from this full moon, really, because if we look at the sun, we know it's got 8 days to reach Neptune. So it's already in orb, it's already getting there around the time of the full moon. We could almost say that full moon is in opposition to Neptune. So we do have that principle of chaos, confusion, misunderstanding, all those things that make life very, very difficult. And there can be all sorts of reasons for that. There can be a lot of political spin. There can be a lot of fog, the fog of war, the fog of conflict. And that's very difficult to see what is truthful, what is not. In our own personal sphere, with all that Neptune, we have to be very careful of our reality. We have to know what is authentic and what is not. And that's the line we must tread has to be authentic and real, not veering off into maybes, mights, hearsay, all those kind of things. I also want to look at the position of Uranus in this horoscope map that we have here. As you can see, it's 18 degrees of Taurus. It's in that 11 o'clock position, which means it's now, have I looked at that correctly? I'm terrible. I leave my glasses off because I'm so vain. And then I can't read the figures correctly. So what we're really looking at here, now I can see it, is that the sun is at 16 Pisces, the moon at 16 Virgo, and Uranus at 15 degrees of Taurus. So we've got Uranus sextiling the sun, we've got Uranus trining the moon. So Uranus is caught up also in the full moon configuration. It's part of the story. Now, why is this important? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I wrote about the earthquake in Turkey and Cyprus, and I looked at that particular full moon, which just preceded it by a matter of hours, which was exactly squaring Uranus. And I made the point that for the entire year, first the new moons and then the full moons were all connecting to Uranus, and they continue to do that now. So you might think, well, isn't that nice? I mean, the sun is sextile Uranus, the moon is trining Uranus. But you've got to think of these planets as being themselves. Uranus is the principle of revolution, of awakenings, of groundbreaking situations, which of course includes earthquakes. But groundbreaking can be progressive and breaking through barriers in a good way. So we use those words to describe Uranus, and they figure within this full moon. Uranus is quite explosive, it's very electric. So we could be looking at explosions, eruptions. We could also be looking at things to do with technology and the internet. So this is all tied in there, and not necessarily in a good way. Likewise for us personally, when we look at that full moon at 16 degrees of Pisces, Virgo, if we've got anything at 16 degrees or around that degree area of Pisces and Virgo, or Gemini and Sagittarius, the other mutable signs, then this full moon is going to speak volumes for us. And of course, I'm going to take you through that very shortly. I just want to see if there's anything else that I should really look at in this map before I move away from it. But just coming back very briefly to that period leading up to the middle of March, and this includes our full moon period, then it's going to be very unstable, very mysterious, very chaotic and confusing, although we cannot leave out the fact that there are other things to do with inspiration and divinity and miracles. They're also in there. So let's come back to me, and let's now take it through sign by sign, so we can see, you know, what this full moon may mean to you. And of course, the house position is important as well. If you know what your ascending sign is, then you'll know where this full moon is falling in your natal chart. And if you're just a sun sign enthusiast, you'll still have a very good idea of what it all means to you from considering your solar chart, your sunrise chart, so to speak. So if we start with Virgo, because Virgo is the sign the moon is in, we've got the moon in Virgo, the sun in the 7th house. So we're on the relationship axis, and we're talking about here, remember I talked about the balance between what we must do, what are our responsibilities and duties, not just to ourselves, but to our fellow man and to other people, versus escapism, where we can drop the shackles of discipline and all those things and sort of really get out there and experience the divine. You know, we escape. That has to be in balance. And if it's not in balance, then you'll know, because your life will show you it's not in balance. But we come specifically to Virgo, and we think about the moon in your sign. You're always empowered when the moon is in your sign. And you could say during the course of the year, as the moon moves through Virgo every month, every 28 days, it's that period in which you're empowered, but particularly so at the time of the full moon. And if you go back 6 months earlier, it takes us to late August, September, when the new moon in Virgo occurred, then there is a relationship between these two time periods. And you may be able to think, oh, yes, I know, I began this around the time of that new moon, late August into early September. And now it's at completion. It's reached a stage where it's done, or it's showing me how well it's done or how badly it's done. And it is time for review and to move on. We've got the relationship axis in play here, Virgo. So it has a lot to do with relationships, whether you are ready to tie the knot, you are ready to make a relationship permanent, or whether a relationship has hit a crisis point and you're looking at that relationship. Could be a working relationship, could be a marriage, could be a friendship, and you're thinking, you know what, this can't go on like this. So you have an opportunity to work it through, try to get it better, or you have an opportunity to say enough is enough. The sun, of course, has been moving through the seventh house, since about the 19th of February, and it will continue to do that until the 21st of March. So you've got quite an accent on the importance of relationships in general and the presence and the impact of other people in your life. But just remember, we're not only trying to find balance, but we're also trying to find completion and closure. Okay? So if we come now to Gemini, the full moon falls in the 4th house, the base of your chart, while the sun is in the 10th house. And this is on the axis of life direction for you. The same if you have Gemini rising. This full moon cuts across the 10th and 4th houses. So it's getting into balance, what I often think of as a good life-work balance. And it's also the balance between the time and the attention, value you place on your family life, and the attention and demands of your role in the world, your role out there, your career. So this is what this full moon is accentuating. It's bringing up to, you could look at it as a crisis point, but you could also look at it as an opportunity to sort of get that balance right between these two very different aspects of life. Now, the idea of closure is also about ending a chapter. And again, this chapter may have begun back in the late August, early September time. So you have a 6-month span in which to look and see, what started then, even if that's something about your own kind of outlook. It doesn't have to be starting a project or starting a relationship. It could just be the things that you associate you did or began around that time. And they have this culmination at this time of the full moon. But sometimes it means something's at end, whether you've come to the end of living in a certain place and you're going to move to another place. It could be the end of a job or the end of a part of a job. You've been focusing in this department, not that department. That's come to an end, and now you're going to be doing something else. So we see the ends of chapters associated with work on the one hand, and home and domestic life and family on the other. And let's not forget that powerful theme of closure and completion. So it could mean the end of a period where there's been a lot of toing and froing and thinking of this, thinking of that, and finally there's a settlement. There's a sense of accomplishment. It's done. The sun, of course, will have been moving through the 10th house since about the 19th of February. So there's a strong accent on getting things of a career nature together and your material world. The sun has an extended period through this. We're talking about a 4-week period. So still, as you go through to the 21st of March, it's good to consciously engage with things are building, with things that are building your world. If we come to Pisces now, and of course, the sun is in your sign. It may even be your birthday around this time. And so the moon is in your opposite sign. So we very much have relationships brought in to your experience at the time of the full moon. And completion, closure. You are either ready to sign on the dotted line and say, yeah, we're working in partnership with each other. We've reached an agreement. We've got a contract. This is where we are. Or you might want to say, let's rip up the contract. It's done. I'm done. And again, let's use that time period of late August, early September, for perhaps the beginning of a series of developments or a relationship or a working project, and you're now sort of at the end of it. With the sun moving through your sign, Pisces, you are at a time of renewal anyway. The sun returning to its original position. So you are beginning a new phase. Each time the sun comes back, you renew yourself, if you like, but always at a different level. So there are lots of things about your personal life, your personal situation, your image, the things that you want personally to manifest. This is happening during the sun's passage through your sign, and at the full moon, that's a super powerful time. But let's not forget all the other things I talked about when we were looking at the horoscope. The importance of Neptune, of course, which is your ruling planet. So you have to build into that all those things I said about Neptune: chaos, confusion, inspiration, joy, divinity. They're all around at this time. They're all capable of manifestation. If we come to Sagittarius, the full moon cuts across that 4th, 10th axis. So we have the sun moving through the 4th house. It's still got a couple of weeks to finish its transit of the 4th house. So things of a family nature are very much to the fore, whether you've got lots of things going on with the family gatherings. And of course, we're not too far away from Easter. So maybe there's a lot of planning and a lot of things going on for that event. And we could also be looking at things to do with a property or actually where you live. And that can mean, you know, not just the neighborhood you live, but the home you live in and its surrounding areas. There's a lot of focus on that in any which way you like to think of it. And when we think about that full moon, we're coming to the end of a chapter, which I said, why I say maybe you're moving home. But I think also this idea of a full moon often bringing crisis. So things that are simmering come to the bubble. So again, if there is imbalance in your life between how much you spend out in the world or on your career or on material matters at the cost of more personal, familial, home sanctuary type things, that's going to be apparent, and the balance needs to be corrected. And yes, it could mean the end of a job or the end of a phase of a job for you. And it's certainly a very, very good time to think about the purpose of your job and the meaning of it and how long you expect to be doing it. And is this the sort of thing you want to be doing for the rest of your life kind of thing? It's a point of assessment. So if we come to Capricorn, we're looking at this full moon in the 9th house, but cutting across the 3rd, 9th axis. So we're on the area of communication. We're talking about the spread of information, the receipt of information, the exchange of information. So there is an important exchange of information going on around the time of this full moon. It could also be a journey that is a full moon journey, so that a lot of things are experienced on that journey. It can be a journey of miles, quite literally. You're going from one place to the other, but that journey is monumental, whether because it's a long journey, so it takes a long time, or whether what happens on that journey really is of great significance to you. And maybe it is both. But of course, we can have a journey in terms of all sorts of things. I often say writing a book is a journey. Now, that's very, personal to me because I do a lot of writing. But going through a study course, learning something, the application of knowledge, the understanding of things is a journey too. And so this full moon does mark the end of a journey. And you can be flexible with that and kind of think about how that really manifests in your circumstances at this point in time. Very occasionally, on a full moon, cutting across this axis, we get a communication we don't like. We get a message, we have a conversation, something comes to us that we didn't know about. Remember, this full moon is connected to Uranus and Neptune. And so we get something that we neither understand and we don't like. But the point is that we need to let it simmer. Now, remember, I talked earlier at the beginning of my video about giving a 2-week cycle to this full moon, because that's the waning cycle before it becomes new. So give something a couple of weeks before you actually decide what it really means. And remember, with all that Neptune around, you're likely not to get the full meaning or the correct meaning. You're likely to be in a bit of a fog about it. So if we come to Aries, then this full moon is in the 6th house. So that is the area of work and well-being. It's systems. It's everything that gives our life a rhythm and texture and routine. And it's essential. If we're ever to accomplish anything, we need a system. Now, I know a lot of people don't agree with me because they're fluid. They like to just do things the way that it comes naturally. But I'm not that person. I'm a system person, maybe because I've got lots of planets in the 6th house. That's the reason why. But I realize that you're more effective with a system. And when we think about all sorts of systems, our health system, for instance, if we've got a good system going for us, our system is in good health, we feel better, we function better. If we are regular, we function better. So all these things are of a 6th house nature. And certainly when it comes to work, it's not necessarily our career that we find in the 6th house. It's more the work involved with our career, how we work at it, where we work at it, the circumstances surrounding that. So this full moon may have something to do, A, with our health, and B, with our working life and the things that constitute our daily life. So with our health, well, a weakness may be exposed if we've been overdoing it, or we've been emotionally overwhelmed with things. We're going to feel it at that full moon. And that means we're stressed out and we need to come back in balance. Okay. Balance is a big feature of a full moon because it shows you where there is imbalance and where we need to get it right. The same really with our work situation. Is it we've got too much work, too many people depending on us? Are we doing too much for too many people? Is that aspect of service, which is the 6th house, a little too much? Are we doing too much for people who don't appreciate it, or we're not looking at our own needs? We've got everyone else's needs in there, but not our own. So this full moon is going to bring all of that to pass. And maybe because of the Neptune and the Uranus factor that's in there, we might have a bit of awakening about this isn't working anymore. You know, just simply not working. And either that might be quite dramatic, you know, you see it immediately, or it kind of dawns on you that you're being drained or your resources are being drained. And that's important to keep that in check. Remember, you're getting the balance back, all right, when you've got a full moon. If we come to Cancer, we're looking at the full moon in the 3rd house. So we're in your small world, your neighborhood, the things that fit into your small world. So the moon's focus is there, but the sun has been moving for a while, since the 19th of February, through the 9th house. So we've got quite an accent on the bigger world as well. And this might manifest in that you're talking to a lot of people on virtual reality, you know, not virtual reality, you know what I mean, Zoom, those kind of things. So you're connecting with people far away, or you may be planning a holiday or going away. Maybe you've been or gone. And you too are on a bit of a journey, because this full moon is about the end of a journey. And so you can be very flexible with this and think of all the things that you started that have taught you a lot, that have given you a lot of experience. It's been a journey. Then it's over. That journey is ended. But it may also be a real journey, a journey in miles, so that a journey completed at this time is not only the completion of a certain distance, you've gone a long way, but actually there's been a lot of experience and understanding and knowledge accumulated through this journey. I think too, with the full moon in the third house, it's got a lot to do with your voice. Now, yes, maybe it is your voice. Maybe you need your voice attended to. You've got a sore throat. But on the other hand, it's about getting your voice heard. And recently I was talking to one of my clients who has got trouble with her voice, and we talked about the fact that she'd been trying to get her voice heard and nobody was listening to it, and so her voice had got smaller and smaller and smaller, and now she had trouble with it. So often our voice, in the real sense of our voice, needs attention on a full moon like this. Or the metaphor for that is really our ideas, our thoughts that need to be welcomed, exchanged, understood. So let's come on to Libra now. And the moon is in your 12th house because Virgo is your preceding sign. So again, the 12-6 axis, as I call it, is one to do with health, health of mind, body, and spirit. And that is really the important factor, because it isn't just about physical health, it's about our emotional health, and it's about our spiritual health. So this full moon is alerting you to the fact that there needs to be more balance here. And if you are too focused on getting your body working, and you're not considering your emotional health, your mental health, and also your spiritual health, you're going to be imbalanced. This just simply isn't working. And if we also look at the amount of energy you're expending on things to do with work or things to do with your daily life, you're forever doing stuff, or the workplace is a place of anxiety and stress, this is all going to come out around the time of the full moon. And the reason for that is that it needs to be addressed and resolved. That's why a full moon happens. It illuminates what's going on, and it often illuminates the things in the shadows. If we think about the full moon, we really see it at night. And the idea that that's what it's doing, it's illuminating the things that we've had in the dark. They need bringing up so that we can see them. Now, for you, of course, the sun is moving through the 6th house. So there's a strong focus on work, not in the sense necessarily of career. Where am I going with my career? Do I need to network and make moves to get ahead? It's more your actual work circumstances, where you work, your workplace, how you work, the systems with which you work. And with the sun in the 6th house, it's a great time to really reorganize your workspace, and also to reorganize the way you work. And that's a big brief, isn't it? How you work, how you come to your work, organize it work, get your systems to work better. And so we come to Scorpio. So the full moon for you is in the 11th house, and the 11th house is about collaborations, enterprise, creative collaborations. It's a brief moment, isn't it? 3 days, roughly, that full moon is at its peak, and it's addressing that area of life. But of course, the cycle goes on for another 2 weeks. So maybe there's a bit of a crisis in a working group, a collaboration. It could be that it's finished. It's time for the team to be disbanded, and it's done. Whatever the enterprise was, whatever the project was, it's done. And maybe that leaves you with a great sense of accomplishment. It's done and dusted, but how good do we feel? This axis, 5th, 11th, is also the axis of gestation. So things have been in preparation for X amount of months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. And so you're now ready to deliver. And, you know, that has all sorts of connotations, really. So it can be a very good thing, a sense of completion in a good way, but it will also raise the emotional, you know, level if things aren't going well. You know, we feel stressed out about things. We're likely to be more emotional about it. The thing about this 11th house too, as you know, the sun is moving through your 5th house at the moment, so it has a lot to do with the creative, your creative center, but it's also the self, and thereby we're talking about the ego. And we need an ego. We can't, it's no good being without an ego, because that's like being without a center. We don't know who we are and where we are, and nothing, you know, stems out from there. But of course, if your ego is too big and too great, then you've got a problem. But it can't be too small either. So this full moon is about recognizing the importance of the ego without, you know, going into the wrong extremes with it. And that full moon may be showing you where there's not enough of you involved in something, or there's too much of you involved in something. And what happens on the full moon is that you get a collective chorus criticizing you, or realizing that your small self isn't, you know, going to work in this bigger context. So it could be a bit of a crisis, if you like, in terms of a group ethos. But of course, all crises eventually leads to progression. So we need those moments when things come to a head, we resolve them and move forward. If we come now to Aquarius, we've got the full moon in the 8th house. So the sun is moving through the 2nd house at the moment, and the 2nd house and the 8th house have a lot to do with values, finance, self-worth, intimacy, the exchange of emotions, feelings, all those kind of things. Very important axis indeed, because, you know, what we need money in order to survive, but we also need love, appreciation, somebody to appreciate our value. So while the sun is in the 2nd house, and it will be moving through there until the 21st of March, we really need to check our value system, and we really need to address why we feel unvalued or devalued by other people. We need to figure it out and figure out how to change that dynamic. And at the same time, we might need to address our finances and see how we can make them stronger and better. Or if perhaps finances have got really into a terrible pickle, we need to really sort that out, stop that flow of money out, get ourselves organized and together. And it may be quite painful. And that may be what this full moon is all about. You've been trying to juggle finances. You've been trying to pay Peter to pay Paul, and it's just no longer possible. That spinning plates thing that we do with finances sometimes, they're coming crashing down now. So a decision has to be made. And that may have to do with resolving or rationalizing our position. And, you know, I often talk about the 8th house as the area of receivership. So it is possible that for a few Aquarians, it is time to go into receivership. For others, it's more about addressing financial matters with partners, with other people, and getting them settled. And of course, financial partners can be credit card companies, banks, lending institutions, all of those. And sometimes, of course, a full moon closure and completion settles a financial dispute, and you receive a settlement, or things are decided, after which things will come to you in a very gratifying way. But certainly I'd say things come to a head financially on the one hand, and also in terms of your value in a partnership, or how other people view you, how much you get from other people, get back from what you give. So that full moon is a crisis about that balance. And there needs to be a balance. You know, you give, they give, you know, so everybody's happy. If you give too much or they don't give enough, my goodness, there's imbalance and upset. So if we come now to Taurus, we now look at the full moon in the 5th house. We look at the sun going through the 11th house. And whenever we're looking at the sun, we've got that 28-day cycle. So from the 19th of February through to about the 20th, 21st of March, the sun will move through the 11th house. And of course, if you've got Taurus rising, the sun will be moving through your 11th house. So we're in that area of collaborations where teamwork becomes very important. And I often say when working with couples, this idea that, you know, yes, we want passion and intimacy and support and all that stuff. But you know something, when we work with our partners as a team, we're on Team Smith and Team Thornton, you know, whatever. It's great because we're working towards a common goal. And this is perhaps behind this full moon, and certainly during the passage of the sun through the 11th, is to define your team goals and where you can join as a team, or even two people as a team, to fulfill those goals. Also, when the sun is moving through this area, we become aware of the importance of the collective and the importance of the collective unconscious as opposed to our own consciousness. It's the big me, the higher self, the group self, as opposed to the little me of the, you know, 5th house self. We need both. One can't be without the other. So the full moon being in the 5th house, which is the area of the small self, the inner self, perhaps what we should call the true self. Maybe there's a bit of a crisis there about you're losing yourself. Remember, we've got Neptune and Uranus tied into that full moon. So this could be a pretty kind of destabilizing period of time where you feel that you've lost yourself. You don't know who you are, what your role is within a bigger context. It may be on a plus side that you are ready to deliver something. That axis of gestation, which this full moon is, means that something has been in preparation and it is now ready to deliver. That's why gestation, 9 months a baby takes to grow and be ready for delivery. We can do that with a project. We can do it with a relationship, with a love affair. So this too plays into that full moon. And remember, we're dealing with crisis. We're dealing with things coming to a head with a view to resolution, or we're looking at closure and completion. So now we come to our, very last sign. So we're looking at Leo, and we have the moon in the 2nd house, and we have the sun in the 8th house. So the moon being a very transitory thing, it's only 3 days where you'll be looking at the moon going through this area, and just particularly on the 7th itself being a full moon, although after that you have a 2-week cycle where there are resonances and reverberations from that. So we look really at finances first and foremost, with the sun moving through the 8th house for an extended period from 19th of February through to the 20th, 21st of March. Then there's a strong accent on working with financial institutions. So that can be credit card companies, banks, lending institutions. It could be working with partners, business partners, affiliates if you've got a company, and of course, life partners if you're in a relationship like that. So there's a lot of focus on that. And it's all about what you get from other people, what other people are prepared to give you, and what you have to do in exchange to get that. And so we can think about this very simply. If you enter an agreement with a financial company to borrow money, your agreement is that you will pay it back. If we look perhaps at that other layer of where the 2nd, 8th axis is important, we look at intimacy, we look at emotions and shared emotions, and of course with intimacy, shared intimacy. So it's about what you're receiving from someone else in those terms and what you're giving. So full moon brings a crisis, brings it to a head. So is that you feel you have found your other, you have complete sense of reciprocity with someone, you may, on that full moon. On the other hand, does it become acutely obvious that you're not getting what you need from a relationship, whether that is indeed things to do with finances or whether it is to do with romance, love, reciprocity? And that's what that full moon is all about. Finance too. Are you in over your head with something? Are you not getting enough back for the investment you've made? And of course, we could think about the investment we make with our career, with our talents, as well as all sorts of other things. Finance. Are you getting back enough? And that full moon will give you some kind of answer. But remember, it's a 2-week cycle. So you have 2 weeks to really think about the right way forward. So I think I've gone all the way through the zodiac. And it is interesting how we look at these full moons, both in the sense of what the signs themselves represent and what is that background that full moon is in, what's it adding to our understanding of what it means. And then we take things another layer and go and look at each of our sun signs, which is a brand, it's our solar identity, and how this full moon is placed within that sphere. So you saw me talk about Neptune in the context of this full moon, because it does connect with it. It's a little wide, but it's in there, same as Uranus. But by the time we get to the week of the 13th of March, we've got Neptune very, very strongly in our midst. It's, in charge of cosmic affairs, as I often say. So we have a Mars-Neptune square, a Sun-Neptune conjunction, and a Mercury-Neptune conjunction. That means things are very mystical. Mystical, if we like mystical, certainly would be a time to think about our spiritual selves and our spiritual discipline and sort of connecting to that bigger spiritual world. When you've got Neptune in pride of place, your access to that is greater. The portals are open to those higher divine levels, but they're difficult to get to and they're confusing because it's a dense and complicated world. When we get beyond our real world and into those virtual divine worlds, it's scary stuff sometimes, and we have to be very anchored and very kind of connected to reality in order to be able to experience those spiritual levels. That's one way of looking at all that Neptune. But we might also look at the chaos of Neptune. We're looking at the confusion. I'm actually recording this at the time that the earthquake in Turkey and Syria has just happened. And I'm looking at the desolation and the devastation and the loss of life, the loss of livelihoods, everything is rubble. And with Neptune, sometimes we get the fog of war. We get the fog of a disastrous event and nobody knows what they're doing or what they should do or whatever. Well, that's an extreme picture of Neptune, but it's something worth holding in your mind because it shows you what can happen with Neptune. We're not getting everything that's good. So the important thing for us when we see these Neptune transits coming up, and we're in that week of the 13th and the week before, the time of the full moon, the time of Saturn's entry into Pisces, we've got to keep checking with reality. We have to keep checking with our own reality and integrity. Every time we're given some information or something happens, we have to check the reality. We don't want to get caught up in the conspiracy of it all or the magic of it all all, the chaos of it all. We want to connect with reality at all times, come back to our base. That way we can thread our way through this very chaotic period. The other thing I wanted to talk about, with Neptune, is that when we have Neptune aspects in our charts to the personal planets, the martyr savior theme is very strong in our lives. And either we love to save and rescue people, or we're forever feeling, we're a victim of circumstance. That's how that, dual path works. So this also needs to be in our thinking at this time, both on our own level. When something happens, we need to be pretty sure we're not allowing ourselves to become victims. Of course, it's good to rescue people and help them, but some people shouldn't be rescued from themselves. They need to rescue themselves, and that needs to be in your thinking. And perhaps too, at this particular time that this video is covering, we may notice that there are martyrs. People are sacrificing themselves, being self-sacrifice for others. That's something to bear in mind with what we're seeing in the news, with what we're seeing around us. But we must also be aware that of victims, what can we do for victims? And we become aware of what's going on in the world that is creating so many victims. So quite a lot to think about, I think. I want to thank you again for being there. Really, I mean, why would I do this unless it's for you? So please keep on watching, sending me your comments, subscribing, sharing things, because as I always say, we can't get enough good astrology. Bye for now.